What's up, guys? How we doing today? Hope y'all are doing fantastic. Back today. Today's day number 19 of National Preparedness Month, September 2025. And today's topic, we're going to talk about Intel. And to me, Intel is one of the most important things you need to consider when the SHTF actually happens. And that's what we're going to talk about. Stay tuned. Be right back. Okay, so Intel. I said that I think it's one of the most important, in fact, if not the most important thing you need to really consider. And it's one of those things you can prep this for free. This one costs you nothing to prepare for, but it's something you've got to really consider because if not really necessarily before, learn to get your intel before because you want to as many indicators ahead of time as possible. But where are you going to get those indicators from? I mean, right now you've got your cell phones, your computer, the news. You've got all that stuff to kind of give you those indicators of when it's going down, of when it's time to bug out or when it's time to we got something happened. What is it? We can get on and we can look at. But let's just say grid goes down. Let's just say that worst case scenario that you've been preparing for. Let's say that happens. Where are you going to get your information from? How are you going to know what's going on in the next town over or two towns over or wherever, wherever you're heading? If you have to bug out and you're going to a bug out location, how are you going to know if something's happened in between that you might run into something along the way? So you've got to be very well versed on how to get your intel. And I don't really have a whole lot of I'm not really a whole lot versed on the communications, on how to, on getting your radios or I can basic program a basic radio, and push to talk. But as far as like getting intel, how are you going to get the intel? And that's the thing. And you've got to have a plan for that. You've got to know, like in your group, who's in charge of intel, who's going to, if you have to go off and on foot and go out and just do firsthand intel, or if you've got the radios that you can communicate with people, and you've got to know how to get your intel. And that's very important. That's very important when it comes to legit SHTF. You've got to know what's going on around you. Like there was a case where it was a video Bear did from Bear Independent. He did just a scenario based, like talked it through, like what would happen if we're out here at this. It was a prepper convention, so it was around a whole bunch of preppers at that time. But he was like, let's just say right here, right now, the Russians or the Chinese or whoever they dropped that nuke on that everybody's been fearing and everything, and and you've got to then immediately you've got to know who's in charge of intel and who's and you've got to figure out where this happened from. And you might still be in an area where you can use your pocket computers, cell phones, if you will. But you've got to know what happened and where it is, and can you get to where you want to go? If you choose, okay, it happened, I got to get home to my family. How far away from home are you? How do you get there? Did something happen in between there? Did it happen? Where did this nuke happen at? Where did they drop it at? Where, did they, most likely they're going to go after the bigger cities, but not necessarily, not completely, if you live near some kind of a military base, you're not a target area. But that's the thing you've got to think about. Like let's just say you're out there on a whatever, a business trip or a road trip or a training event or whatever, and they nuked your town, and everybody is gone. How are you going to know that if you're there? You can't, hey, call my family and see, because if your cell phones are out, how are you going to know this? So you've got to know where and how to get your intel, and you've got to have people for that, and you've got to know intel is, like I said, and I'm not the expert at intel. It's an important thing, but I'm definitely not the intel guy in my group, and that's not my strong point. I've got, like I said, I know how to communicate the information that I get, but going out and actually finding the actual intel is that's not my expertise. I'm trying to tell you from my experience that it is important. You've got to know how to do it, but because if that happened to me, I'd be asking everybody, hey, you know what's going on? Hey, you know what's going on? Hey, you know what's going on? And just trying to get that intel from some other source rather than. But if something happens, you've got to have a plan everywhere you go for intel. You've got to know your intel plan, because things happen in the blink of an eye. Things can happen. Like just this month, 24 years ago, 9/11. Nobody knew that was coming. Some of us may have. Some of you insiders may have, but there's conspiracy theories, and I'm not getting into that. I'm just saying most of us, the general population, had no idea that was going to happen, and it just all of a sudden, boom, life's changed. And things like that can happen in an instant, and we don't know. You can't really see it coming. And then all of a sudden, boom, it happened, and now we've got to try and get our intel. We've got to try and get our, any kind of information we can about it, and what's closed, how can we get in, how can we get out, how can we, where's it at, what else is going on. You've got to know this stuff, because it's vital if you want to, unless you're planning on just setting up camp and base right there and not, forget about my home. It's obviously, if it's been hit, obviously you don't need to do that. But if your home is still there, are you trying to get home? How do you get home? Are the roads blocked? Can you drive? You've got to know all this stuff. And it's very important to have your intel, know how to get your intel. Something I need to work on, because, in my prepper group, the people that I do stuff with, is maybe I have my people, but if I'm out on my own on some kind of a trip for whatever reason, if I'm out traveling or out driving or and something happens, how am I going to know? Because I'm not, like I said, I'm not the expert at this. Just get some training, learn intel, learn how to get your intel, figure things you just gotta consider. This is National Preparedness Month. Yeah, it's not really one of the hot topics, popular topics that everybody wants to talk about, but it's one of the most important ones. Is how do you get your intel? And again, I can't give you a whole lot of advice on that. I'm just giving you the gist of, hey, it's important. You got to know it, and you've got to figure something out, or have a way to figure it out. No, even if it's just your little ham radio with the NORA, but that's mostly just weather and stuff. It's not news, but like I said, you've got to have that figured out. We've got our way to get intel now, because everything works. But when everything's not working, how are you going to get your intel? Something that's important. But anyway, if I keep going, I'm just going to start rambling. So have your intel team, have your intel, process, start thinking about your way to get your information, get your intel of what's going on, and especially after, so that you know it after the balloon goes up and whatever you want to call it, the S hits the fan or whatever. Just have that plan in place. Know how you're going to do it. If it's not you, if it's somebody else, make sure they've got it all squared away, and that, but anyway, appreciate y'all. Do the YouTube stuff. There's links below for everything. Just do the things. There's support. There's other channels that I have that I'm trying to grow. Down below, there's whatever links. Just check them out if you feel like it. If not, just hit that subscribe. Anything helps. Every tiny little bit helps. Cost you nothing. And always stay aware of your situation. Always have the intel. Have situational awareness of where you're at and how to get out and whatnot. And stay strapped. Carry the most useful tool that you can legally carry to protect yourself. I recommend a gun, but if you can't carry a firearm legally for whatever reason, carry the most lethal thing that you can legally carry just to protect yourself. And stay aware of your situation. If you have to get out, get out. If you can't carry, find your way out as quickly and as efficiently as possible so you're not involved in anything. But anyway, again, appreciate y'all. Love you. See you in the next one.